ahí se formó. El timán de Tito Puente suena y la voz de Héctor Lavoe contesta. Llega si ven More y la rumba. La fiesta llegó al ritmo de una guaracha con Celia baila mi gente. Nos deja como recuerdo su ritmo y salsa caliente. Al ritmo de conga y piano su salsa queda presente. Ya nadie podrá olvidarla, su amor se queda por siempre. Al ritmo de una guaracha. Al ritmo de conga y piano.
Al ritmo de una guaracha con Celia baila mi gente.
Bailando a gozar.
Al ritmo de conga y piano su salsa queda presente.
Oye mi cuatro. Rico.
Ja Aba Ene so son konkron Yeda wasi Je wona ebusa wo Se die ni mukan na fa ko Okun ya ewe ni bi A ye hu ko Na meju ayeye Ambeju ayeye ayeye ya wudia eju ayeye okunku eje oba tampeje Ambeju ayeye ayeye sewo obro pomiami ana sewo oba tampeje Mumusano beya mamo onhweno mubohuno abatampeje yeah 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 yeah
I look better in the dark, so do the slides. So anyway, pleased to be here again, and what we'd like to do is share with you the progression of the thought process and the development of some optional design potential, and then a proposed design that has been presented, and we do think addresses most of the issues that have been brought up, but by no means is the process over, and we certainly welcome comments and suggestions, and that's what this is all about, to try to get community input and to make sure that you folks are happy with the final product. So we began by working with Ellen and her staff to develop a space needs program for the existing library. We read the report that was done, I believe, in January of 2014, kind of a visioning process for the library. We developed a series of alternative approaches, and you'll see a proposed design tonight. So we've looked at a lot of different things in terms of not only the collection, which everybody can see, but there are lots of other aspects to a library, including, needless to say, the staffing, places to sit, technology, issues of getting together and studying and researching together, all very, very important elements. When this is something out of the visioning report from late or early 2014, that people wanted more space for the collections, and that's been reiterated, I should say, more than once as we have met with both staff and the public, that this is a materials-intensive library, and that's something that's quite important. Everybody wanted to see a separate children's area to provide more study space, to really have a place for more technology, which is everybody seems to ask for these days, to have a place for teens. Years ago, people tried to figure out how to keep the kids out of the library, and everybody, quite frankly, wants to make sure that young children and teens are really readers and need to be part of their everyday life. We developed a program. This is a summary. And basically it tells us that we thought that the library needed a little over 14,000 square feet. There is currently about 9,400 square feet. And so part of the goal was to determine how we might be able to expand the library, with a goal perhaps of a little over 14,000 square feet. But I think, as all of you might realize, anything is going to help. Not only in terms of space, but in terms of the way in which it's organized and laid out. When you look at the library, there's some pretty important elements that perhaps are very strong parameters to decision making. One, which you might not think of as very important, is this wall, which is a flood wall that was in effect developed because of Montgomery County criteria. This little hole here, in theory, has a flap that lets water out but doesn't let water back in case water backs up. The whole notion of the mural on the wall, which is a very important element, we all think. But basically, the exterior of the library is in pretty good shape. The roof is in pretty good shape. It's got photovoltaics. Windows are pretty good. The walls are pretty good. So that's never been a real issue. However, the inside is a different story. There's some pretty archaic mechanical electrical systems. The furnishings are kind of old and tired, but you all know that. I'm not telling you anything that you don't really know. There's some code issues in terms of bathrooms, that they're both inaccessible and the number of fixtures do not meet current codes. The space between stacks doesn't really meet current ADA requirements. And when you begin to widen stacks or even lower stacks, it just takes more room to house the same collection. So there's some issues that need to be addressed just from a code standpoint. But the building is basically in pretty good shape. So let's talk about the library, which is an aerial view here with the community center over here. We've talked a little bit about the fact that how important the mosaic is. The fact that this is an interesting building. This is a black and white photograph of the existing building from the 60s. Very simple, very clean, kind of an example of international style. To this was added the reference area, which is right in this area today. And the rear of the library has a whole other bay of space. But this is kind of what's there. Very simple L-shaped library with the staff at the apex of the two wings and adults at one end, children at the other end. Very logical and common way of designing libraries. Windows are typically fairly high. They used to start about 6 or 8 feet high, and that enabled them to line all the walls with books and materials and brought high light in. What it didn't do is enable anybody to look outside or anybody outside to look inside to see what's going on, to bring a little bit more natural light in, and to try to connect the inside with the outside. And that's something that we have talked about as part of the goals. So here's a plan, a site plan of the existing library and site. The library is basically this L-shaped, although the library does operate several rooms around the, I'll call it the atrium, it's not a real atrium, with the second means of access. So you all know you can get there from the front door, you can get there from the back door and come into the library. But it's a little bit disjointed, as you know. The flood wall is an important element, and if we don't have to touch it, that's great. But if we do, we've got to somehow replace it. And we've talked about the mosaic as well. And there is a 20-foot setback from Philadelphia Avenue. So when we look at a site and we think, where in the world are we going to expand this library? Really can't expand it in this direction very easily because of all the parking. You can expand it this way, but we've heard time and time again, try not to touch any trees. Leave the image of this library in a park and expand it without hurting trees. You could expand this way, but that means addressing the mosaic wall, taking it down and either relocating it or putting it back up, and that's not an insignificant task. People have talked about, this is actually one story down, this is where the police park. People have talked about, could you bridge over that? That's a fairly expensive way of doing it, and it's really kind of remote from the center part of the library. So we've struggled a little bit, and you all know that you come in, the children's area, kind of a periodical and storage area, the adult area, and the staff area, which is quite small. And as we look at it, we talk about how patrons are going to flow through the library. We want to make sure that the staff can monitor what's going on in the library. It's important for them to be able to do that. Want to make sure that the staff can interact with patrons and solve the problems. There's been an issue we've talked about over the last months of where is the front door to this library, because A lot of people come in this way, but a lot of people actually come in from the community center. And we've talked at length about the connection between the community center and the library, that ought to flow somehow, especially if, in fact, that the library is really operating several rooms that are part of the library but are almost physically not in the library. So, how can we make the library operate as one unit and flow fairly well? So we looked at a couple of very early options where we simply said, take the existing space that you have and lay it out in a different way. And you can see that we removed the atrium and we tried to get the library within kind of the same square footage. So we didn't really add any square footage, and while a library could be laid out like this, part of the collection couldn't be housed here. We couldn't fit as many people in. There couldn't be as much technology. But it was a good exercise to see what would happen if we simply reorganized it. Was that part of the problem? Then we said, well, at the time, we can't really touch the mosaic wall. So whatever we do, we've got to grow towards Philadelphia Avenue. And so in this case, we've sort of stepped an expansion down, expanding the children, expanding the adult, putting in I'll call it a program room, a room like this that can be used for meetings or lots of different events. And, it kind of worked. However, it began to take down trees and get pretty close to Philadelphia. And then we've heard later that, maybe we could take down the mosaic and move it or relocate it. And so we said, well, would that help in terms of a way of expanding? So we said, if we expand this way, logically we can expand the adult area in this direction. We can still expand the children's area in this way, but then we can begin to step it very much like the original design was stepped and try to step around the trees for all practical purposes. And that's why some of the stepping was done where it was. And it was a reasonable approach, but we still had not solved some of the problems in terms of connecting. And so we presented these options. And these are some of the comments we received from the council, all good comments, both about the site and about the library itself. But this connection between the community center and the library was quite important. They encouraged us to find other places that perhaps we could expand the library, saving most of the trees, leave the mural if at all possible. All these are what I would suggest in any case. It just makes the problem to be solved a little bit more difficult. And from the library standpoint, to make sure it's flexible, because if there's one thing we know, the library is going to change over the years. And as technology changes, and it is changing daily, libraries are going to be quite different in 5 years than they are today. So don't tie yourself into a series of small rooms. Excuse me. Excuse me. Another was to develop a way the library can be closed off. Sorry. Thank you. We wanted to add some group study rooms, but basically to maintain a pretty big printing collection. Come on in. Have a seat.
We're actually extracting one.
Oh, well. It's been very good.
See you later, Becky.
So these are some of the comments that we received from the council. So what we've suggested doing, I'll use this as a demonstration. One of the things that we had always looked at in previous options, and I think you can see it here, and I'll just use this one because it's in the center. There's a stair that's adjacent to the entrance as you go into this atrium, and this goes down to the garage, into where the police are. We finally discovered that it was not a required stair, either for exiting or operationally. And so we thought, well, the best place to really begin to think about expanding is out in this direction, but keeping the trees, not really touching the mosaic because that's just opening a can of worms, but potentially beginning to think about filling in this area, which is kind of a landscaped area. But frankly, if you think of all of this as potential library space, it contains all the library functions in one area. So the proposal, and this is illustrating a piece of the community center as well so that you can understand how these all tie together. What you see in yellow is, is new construction. What you see in the tan is renovation. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry about that. I just excuse me. And what we're proposing is, frankly, taking the entrance from over here and moving it over to where people park. And so you can go directly from the parking lot, directly into the library from this direction. And there's also obviously a major entrance that goes into the community center. And begin to tie together, architecturally, these two entrances to let people know that as you drive in, that, or if you're walking and you're coming up this way in any case, because you've never been able to walk up next to the flagpole and climb over the wall, so you might as well go ahead and bring a sidewalk up and, and recognize the fact that there are two entrances to two civic public facilities right here off the parking lot. It's where people expect to find front doors. So in this case, we're suggesting coming in this direction, locating actually the adult area here, and you're going to see this in a blow-up in a minute, have the circulation desk, restrooms, a children's area, and a new program room, and the staff would wrap around in this L shape, and here are new computer rooms and a relocated senior room and senior office. And so from the desk here, the reception desk at the reception center, if you were to come down, you'd be coming right down this corridor, and we've proposed widening the corridor and right into the library so that there's a visual connection between the desk at this point and the library. I don't have enough hands here. So I'll show this in a little bit larger scale. So you would come in here. This could be some display. There's some display, new restrooms, a mechanical room. Restrooms are hidden by a low wall with some materials on it. Circulation desk is here. You can monitor who's coming in this direction and who's coming in this direction. This is the relocated senior room and a new senior office that would be adjacent to the senior room. So they basically have a space that's pretty much the same size as the one that they used to have, which was located right here. As I said before, so this becomes the kind of the entry part to the library. And this is a suggestion for furniture, so we still have not totally worked this out. But the children's room would be in this location. Obviously, the mural is still here, and we're proposing to open up the face of the library so that people can see in and people can see out, take advantage to the landscaping. Staff, as I said before, would wrap around here, so their service would still come in this location. Here would be a brand new program room, a room like this, that could be used for library programs, summer reading, story time, whatever, so that the staff does not have to move the stacks out of the way in order to have story time anymore. It could be used for poetry readings, could be used for an event like last night when there's a debate and you have a video, or you could show it and invite people to come and talk. All kinds of different things could happen in that room. And then and you can see how this is then related to the room upstairs. So we've basically taken over the atrium space and we've incorporated into the library. So the basic public area, I would say, is here. These would be all glass walls so that you could see in, so that as you're walking down this area and looking outside, because this is all glass, You could also look into the computer room. So it's not like you're walking down a corridor, you're really walking through a space. And so, and this is a fairly wide corridor that gets wider as we get to a place where you go down a couple of steps, because the floor level of the community center is about 10 inches higher than the floor level of the library. And for those of you who've come in down the ramp, that's exactly why there is that little ramp there from the atrium area. So we have to make that up with another little ramp and probably 2 steps. So this is the proposed layout. It's about 15,000 square feet. So it meets the size requirement that we thought was required. And so then we decided to investigate from a 3-dimensional standpoint what this might look like. And for those of you who can remember what the outside of this building used to look like, this is kind of a little aerial. Got 3 things going on here. I'm looking in this direction. This is the existing library, and this is the existing community center. And you can see basically the canopies. This is a little elevated aerial. This is your flagpole. These are the actual locations of the trees from the survey that we have. You can see that we've kept the mosaic, and that stops here, but we've expanded the building a little bit more, and we've simply wrapped more glass. Now, this is pretty conceptual at this point, so don't think of this as a final design, but it's a conceptual thought that enables people, as you're driving by or walking, to be drawn into the library, to hopefully discover what's in the library. It's both from a marketing standpoint as well as from a standpoint of it's good for healthy buildings to have natural light. Frankly, the first couple of times I came to the library, I actually drove by it because it was dark and it was at night and you couldn't find it. So having somewhat of a subtle lantern will enable people to find it. It becomes, I think, an important civic building. From a floor level, this is kind of, if you're across the street, once again, this is the exact location of the mosaic, so you can basically see we're trying to expand this building so that it looks like it's a natural expansion. We're not trying to change the design and try to impose some new architectural expression plastered on a very simple, straightforward, kind of residentially scaled building. And so the way in which we think it ought to be enhanced is through some more glass and to make sure that there's, you know, some stepping in it so that it doesn't seem to be overwhelming. Just a little closer up. An idea, of coming into the entrance. These are existing windows, I should tell you. But if we come in to the side, that, you know, we're showing a little, maybe a stone wall, a little canopy to lead you into the new entrance. We're suggesting that perhaps whatever happens here happens at the community center so that there is an indication at both locations that here's a front door, you're welcome, it's lit, it's, you know, welcoming, hopefully. Just a closer view. Then looking the other way from the community center. So, you know, we're illustrating the mechanical equipment that's still there, so you can get a sense of what you have. But, you know, as I said before, people expect when they drive into a parking lot to find a front door and not to have to search for it. So we thought that it would be very helpful to, you know, illuminate and have some sort of a sheltered enclosure for both. This is kind of a weird shot because this is a pit down here where the police, not literally, I mean, it's a depressed area, I'm sorry, where the cars are parked. But just to give a sense, this is that corridor, and we haven't changed anything here. These are existing columns, and we're simply putting glass between the existing columns so that you can walk down that corridor directly into the library. And of course, this is all existing, as are these walls. So the garden is still here. So once again, we haven't touched some of the landscaping that we have heard is so important. So that's kind of a big picture of where we are at this point, with both from a standpoint of planning in terms of how the library might be expanded, and an idea of what it might look like. We have not spent a great deal of time doing anything other than kind of massing it to try to test the plan and see whether, it could turn into a nice building that reflects the existing character and continues the theme that's already here. So, yes, sir.
If you can go back to one of the floor plan views. Yes. Something that may be a question that people have is they're wondering, gee, is that really all the stacks that there are now, or how does it relate to it? And if you can point out kind of the edge treatment that is kind of maybe not clear to people.
Yes.
That's where a lot of that.
Thank you. We have counted all the stacks that are in the library today, and all of our options are either right on or very, very close to the existing number of stacks. And that's been one of the goals. We've talked about many of the newer libraries that you see have much lower stacks that are 60 or 66 inches high. A lot of your stacks are 84 inches. We're going to keep those because it's important to be able to house the collection that you have. But one of the things, and I think I mentioned it in the beginning, is that there are high windows in the library. So we are taking advantage of where there are high windows and lining those walls with stacks. So it's not just the stacks that you see here, but where there are high windows, we're taking advantage and lining those with stacks as well. Conceptually, we're illustrating seating at windows so that people can sit and look outside. In both cases, here, this little corner here. This is a young adult area, so it's their own space, kind of definable space. Did that answer your question or not yet?
I think so. If you could just kind of trace with the laser the ones that are below windows.
Okay, all of what you see here, all the way down to there.
Also that little curve in on the
yes,
area.
all of this, then all of this, all of this. And we do have stacks here, but they'd be low. They'd be below window height, below window sill height. So we're taking advantage of this. And certainly in a children's area, there are those opportunities for picture books to be low in any case. And for an adult, these are stacks too that are low. They're perfect locations for things like periodicals, where you might come in and read the newspaper and have the periodicals on some low shelving in front of you. So
I'm sorry, where's the periodicals?
Could very well be against the windows. We haven't really determined exactly where everything is. What we're trying to do is illustrate that we can fit the programmatic elements within this. And to be honest with you, Ellen's staff has made some suggestions and they're reflected here, but we have not really gone any farther than saying, let's test this. And you can see a great deal of space here that has, quote, nothing in it, but ultimately would probably have computers, would have new book display, probably would have more tables and chairs, but we actually have fit many more tables and chairs than we initially thought we could. And I'm not even sure I can give you the number that you have today, but
can you tell me, so there's in the curb,
yeah.
On the inside, there's two small rooms, or
yes, these are.
What does that say? What is that?
It says GS. Those are called group study, and so there are three little rooms where people could come in and either study together. Could be a literacy training. You could do a group project if you're kids or adults, or just one person could go in because it's quiet and things are noisy. Two of them open from this side. One of them opens from the children's side.
And I assume they have glass walls for
yes, they
purposes?
do. They all have glass walls for.
But there'll be sort of audio buffered, so.
Yes, acoustically separate, but visually totally open. Once again, one of the critical elements is we want to see everything that's going on in the library. And so these walls would be, for the most part, glass. The common wall might not be glass, but then, of course, you can see right through it. But that one might not be glass because there could be a whiteboard on it or a video screen. People are now hooking up their personal electronic devices and, researching together. So those are some of the details that are sort of floating out there that have not been addressed. But yes, the idea is that these are glass rooms. Oh, a lot. I think she had her hand up first. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Whoever.
The program room, instead of just using it as things for events like this, for things that would be in the children's section now, it could be used also as somewhere where adults who would usually be, like, if they would read aloud to, like, children in the library, they could go there, because
Yes.
I can find it, if there are parents reading to their younger children, I can find it harder to read my own personal book, and I've found that other children around my age have that same problem.
I don't deny that that's been an issue, partly because it's so tight here.
Yeah.
Yes,
Where would periodicals be, please?
they have not been particularly determined. One option would be to have some of them below windows, near seating. It's really not been determined. The exact location of all the collections hasn't been done. This is a very conceptual layout at this point. Yes, sir.
Do you know how the library operate when this is going on, all the construction?
It would have to be relocated. It could not stay open while the construction is going on. As soon as you get rid of bathrooms, upgrade mechanical, upgrade electrical, there's really no way you can keep it open.
Has that been addressed, do you know at all?
Yes, it's been discussed.
It's been discussed, and I think in the final analysis, a lot of our programs would be continue in the community center, and the circulating, functions of the library would be elsewhere, hopefully in a place that was close enough so the people who use the library currently and walk to the library could get there. But it's really under discussion.
Do you have ideas where those places?
No, I'm not sure.
And based on this design, how long do you estimate it would take for the construction?
I'd probably say a year to maybe a few more months, depending. But it's mainly is not a lot of new construction, and so that may help the work. It's a lot of inside work, so at least a year. Nothing takes less than a year, no matter what size it seems to be. This program room also, I should have said this before, and we've done this before, this could be actually furnished with tables that fold up with chairs and could actually serve as a formal, in quotes, quiet study room. Many libraries have a fairly large room where people can go in and just read or study or research with their computer. It's very easy. We've done this in another library where we do folding tables, and there are plenty of plugs in the floor. And when a program happens, there's some very good, very lightweight tables. You fold right up, put them on a dolly, put them in the storage room, and it becomes this room without a whole lot of effort. So it gives a whole nother space for the library that could be programmed in lots of different ways. Yes, ma'am?
Have you found, or has it been identified by the community or the staff, a certain uniqueness to this collection? Not the number of the collection, but a uniqueness that sets Tacoma Park's collection apart from other libraries in the area? And if so, how does this design, the specific design, highlight and enhance the collection that we have to make us special and attractive to people who don't always come to Tacoma Park?
That's it. The thing that strikes me is something about this library is not necessarily its collection, but it's a fairly broad collection of a wide variety of titles, but it's a very comfortable residentially scaled library. It's tied to a neighborhood as opposed to large regional libraries. It's not an institutional building in so many ways, even though it's as big as any institutional building, but it has a very comfortable residential feel. And I think that what we're trying to do here is to maintain that feel and really house the collection. You might want to address the collection issue.
Only, a lot of that has to do with our independence and the fact that the collection has been built by staff at this library and reflect the feedback that we get from people here. We don't have to go through a bureaucracy of corporate offices that decide what this library should have. And, we can be responsive in a lot of ways fairly quickly, and that's been a tremendous advantage. Okay.
Yes, sir.
1/4 to 1 foot blow off of this thing, because the one that's in the wall in the library in the display case is woefully inadequate for someone to examine that carefully,
Sure.
to really get a nose flattening squint as a duly.
Well, that's my fault. We just had a little.
That's fine. We can.
I would prefer to be a 1/4 inch to 1/2 foot versus a foot.
Yeah, probably we don't have paper big enough for
I
that.
don't know what size printer you got.
Typically-
At least 1/4 to a foot.
Typically, we'd give you an 8th scale plan, which is on a 32 by 40
Because,
sheet.
you look at it in the case and it's just,
Right. Be about the size of that whiteboard back there.
whatever. But it would
Okay.
be nice to be able to examine that
Sure.
much more closely.
Is it online?
Pardon me?
Is it online?
It is on
This is,
the
yes.
city website, yes.
Well, again, you're stuck with whatever size your monitor is. And
No, I understand.
personally, no offense to anybody that loves online, but I would prefer to keep my eyes
It's very
on a
simple.
piece
We
of
can,
paper versus a LED or cathode ray or whatever kind of display you got. Also, I'd like to make you aware of the fact, and the mayor can testify to this, that when you're moving the entranceway, which I certainly am opposed to, because until they did the redo of the community center, you used to walk past the American flag as you entered our library. And I figure you've done the Silver Spring Library. Have you ever done any other libraries in Maryland? Because
Oh, yes.
there's a Maryland statute that says all municipal buildings, not should, could, or maybe, shall have an American flag. And I've been at loggerheads with the city for the last few years because the city tries to maintain that the flag in our Veterans Park is the flag for the municipal center and for the library.
I can't address that, but
Well, I'm very much opposed to moving the entranceway, and what I was getting at is that twice in the last several years, we've had floods from the parking lot enter the community center. Major floods, one year in particular. And they've been remediating the teen room over here over the summer, putting drains in by the doorway. There's been various times where there's been stacks of sandbags and whatnot near the back door or the staff entrance to the library, as well as the teen room entrance. And so I'm very concerned that having the main entrance there is going to present a problem down the road.
well, I think one of the
And I have one more question,
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
may. I don't see, and that's why I want to look at it really blown up, I don't see a good sally port. And the sally port that we have on the front entrance of the library today is inadequate, because what happens is, as someone who's been using this library since 1955, and is in here almost every day, sadly, children want to play with the door. And when you push the button, both doors open.
understand.
So you get a horror of a draft in the wintertime. And I want to see a sally port that saves us taxpayers some money by having one door open, you enter the sally port, the door closes behind you, then the door opens, so that you at least have,
Understand.
because a lot of times in the wintertime, the door will be open every 5 seconds practically, and I'm being hyperbole, but for a reason, because if you're trying to study, it's kind of hard if you're just reading a newspaper and there's this draft coming in. And it says,
No, I understand. We are showing a vestibule. It maybe needs to be wider, but we have faced that problem on others.
Deeper
Yeah.
is the point.
Right.
not wider.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yes, ma'am.
Is the only way for a wheelchair person to come from the community center to come out?
Yes, you could come here and down
Is
this
that a
ramp.
ramp there?
That's a little ramp.
I wasn't sure.
Looks kind of funny, doesn't it? But it's a ramp.
Are there plans to build a model?
Beg your pardon?
Are there plans to build a model?
If the city wants one, yes.
I would recommend that too.
Write the check.
Yes, sir.
Just a question on where the circle entrance or the circle pathway is, and there's sort of a V shape down in the lower right-hand corner there.
So the.
You're talking about here?
Yeah, so the edge of the V that goes toward Maple seems to stretch further than the edge of the V that comes down toward Philadelphia. And it seems like there's room between the trees there. So I wonder if that's just some extra space that could be sort of gotten.
Well, let's go back to this.
Right, could this yellow just go down another 10 feet? Not
this yellow?
No,
the other
this one.
That one,
Yeah.
toward south, if you want.
This one here?
Yeah, right in that space there.
I guess we don't have a final survey, and we need to make sure we keep out of the drip line of the tree. That's the key.
Yeah, that tree's already been compromised. That's the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial tree you're talking about. I would be very upset if that tree gets further encroached. The bike share station that was placed in already critically cut the roots out.
Right, but there would be ways to move those things around. That would damage the tree,
potentially,
but I'm just
yes.
wondering if that would be a way to get.
Yes, I think, once again, what you're looking at is a conceptual proposal, and no dimensions are on this exactly, but that's the approach. Yes, sir.
I was on the advisory committee for the community center when they were doing that, and it was always intended that eventually that lower level parking area would be decked over in front, and they had ideas of what to put out there, maybe a Parisian style restaurant out there. But you know, it was never intended that just remain as this big deep gash in the earth. And so at some point, I hope that they'll come up with ideas of how to use that space. And I don't see why the library couldn't take the lead, even take a small part of that and deck it over in that area. And
over
use it
here.
as, yeah, and just even as a small, would that be that expensive to, I mean, you'd gain a few extra square feet, but could lead the way to, you know, giving people a little boot in the bottom to say, okay, didn't we once say that this was supposed to look nice out there?
You know, it's not an altogether bad idea. It's not an inexpensive way of building square footage. However, and in light with that, one of the things we talked about, there's a conference room right here in the community center that has doors that lead out to kind of an area. And the library talked about, gee, could we put a couple of tables out there and put a door in from this? And so yes, if you continued that across, that would give you that much more outdoor space. The issue is just, is that something that the city wants to fund or not? And that's something that we could discuss. Yes? Yes.
So instead of having a room where the parents read to their children, their small children, because, we could have a entirely different room instead of the children's section for things like this, like the 80th anniversary of our library. We could have that in an entirely separate room so that people that wanted to come into the children's section and read their books with silence and no disturbances, and could read on their own.
Good idea. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit more about the natural light? The building, especially as it expands in those directions, gets deeper and wider.
Yeah.
So, and I see you've got these 2 walls or 3 walls
Go
really
back
of
here.
natural, which is fabulous. But I'm also looking at the walls that exist now, the wall where the mural is, which is understandable, there's no point in, you can't add windows to that. And then the other side has got the mechanical and the toilets, and then the other side is like the center of the building. So is it really going to be adequate daylight just to have those 3 new walls at the edge? Do you need skylights? I mean, you've got this beautiful atrium, well not atrium, but the beautiful space right in the center of the library, which is the really public welcoming space. But I'm just wondering, is there really going to be enough daylight there to make it feel good?
You know, I think there will be, but I think it's a good question and we can investigate that. The key, perhaps one of the parameters here is, as you know, there are solar panels on the roof right now. And they pretty much cover the entire roof. We'd have to kind of figure out whether we could bring any more natural light in. But, you know, if this is all glass in quotes, but has a
But
lot
it's
of
so
glass
deep,
in
how
it.
wide are the bays?
Oh, gosh. I can't even tell you what the exact
Deeper than
dimensions
60
are.
feet.
In terms of this direction?
Yeah, from
This
the
is
glass
1, 2, 3,
inwards, right. Yeah,
It's about 45 feet to 50 feet from here to
okay,
here.
but that means it's 90 feet all the way to the back wall.
That is correct. That is
So by
correct.
the time you get inside 90 feet, there's not going to be much natural.
Well, I mean, you've got natural light coming in this way, which you don't have any today. You do have natural light coming in here.
I'm
and
just
here.
wondering, I mean, you do have solar panels, but you're also going to be expanding the roof area.
That is correct.
So you could actually have this, if you had the same number of solar panels in a different placement, you could actually have some central skylines.
That's true.
Which
That is
would be
true.
nice for them to be right over that central atrium would be super.
That's a
In
good
my-
suggestion.
in my
I'll,
humble opinion.
we'll write that down because, you know, frankly, we haven't worked with the
I mean, to me,
folks
one of the
who run
big
that.
assets of this is besides just expanding the library, which it needs, is having more daylight in the
Mhm.
library. It just
Agree.
makes it such a much more welcoming space, and it makes people fall in love with the space. Space is really important. We go to restaurants, we go to all kinds of, we pick stores because of the space.
I understand.
And this is, it has a residential feeling, but once you get inside a building like this, it doesn't really feel
Mhm.
like a residence. It's much more open. Well, especially since most of us live in small residences. This would be a large, light, airy space that would be really,
I
and
think
I think
that's
this
a good
is
thought.
really
It's a good
important.
thought. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
I actually had a question, kind of related to that about a library's archival role and the impact of natural light. I mean, in this day and age, are libraries not considered archival, and is light not a potential danger to
The light's not a danger because we can specify glass that cuts out the bad rays
Okay.
for
So light is
deteriorating
good in
collection.
libraries.
So
Yeah,
light is
yeah.
good,
It
and we
used to
and the technology for glass is so advanced, and hopefully it'll continue to advance, but that we can pick kinds of glass, because all glass is, thermally broken. There are two panes of glass, and you can pick a pane of glass on the inside, you pick a pane of glass on the outside, and you can get rid of the bad rays and also reflect a certain amount of the sun. So we can specify how much light comes through glass without being mirror glass that everybody hates. But, you kind of try to do that balance, but we can protect the materials against that. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
One other question. You mentioned you preserved, although changing slightly, the senior room. Are there other rooms that are there now that are
Yes.
kind of lost or taken over?
No, there were 2 computer rooms. Yes, there was one room that was lost. There are currently 2 computer rooms, a senior room, and I guess it's labeled a music room, something like that.
It's the media room now.
Media, right. That would have to be relocated or
Yeah, I think it's,
absorbed.
relocation has been discussed, and also there's next to the director's office, in that little corner up there, there's the office where the lifelong Tacoma person would be relocated.
Right.
So there's an additional office there.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I'm honing in on a lot of furniture, and I know this is just placement for whatever.
That's fine.
I've been looking a lot of library furniture. And so one of the things is, do you really need every staff member to have their own desk? Because a lot of other libraries are sharing desks, because they can share all the information. You log into the computer, you're going to get your information, especially when you have shift changes.
Mhm.
You don't need a desk necessarily for everybody. Well, could that free up space for perhaps a media room, for example? The other concern I have is coming in from the community center. How auspicious looking is that entrance? I mean, does it look like really inviting? What's going to be like, oh, come here, instead of, because the beginning of that corridor, even though it's got windows on the side, it's smaller and then it opens up. So what is it about it when you're walking down that aisle that says, come on in? What's missing for me, even though I can visualize this pretty much, like in Denver, they have these CAD drawings, and you can go through
Right.
you can fly through the library, okay? And I think for some people who have difficulty with spatial, some people call it spatial intelligence, but I don't, whatever. They can't. imagine.
And we'll be able to do that when we get a little bit farther on. You'll be able to walk through the library. I think that's important. Just in answer to your first question had to do with the
Staff space.
the staff space. And frankly, you know, we expect a lot of the staff to be on the floor, but where two people are part-time, we would only suggest using one workstation. And right now, we're simply illustrating, I think that there were 11, if I'm not sure, just small workstations, but there are also counters and open space, because you're going to have a lot of book carts back there.
We do. We have a tremendous amount of inventory and a lot of materials that have to do with our programs, our crafts, this, that, and the other thing, our Legos. The fact that we're independent, the fact that we don't share materials with other branches and don't share programs normally with other branches means that we need a dedicated space for a lot of what we do. And I'd invite Elizabeth to come and see the library staff areas, which are really, really messy and really crowded now. But, you know, a lot of those materials simply need to be there. We also have 2 staff members that currently occupy what is now a periodical and storage room.
Right.
And they would be moved over with the rest of the staff. We'd have a little conference space, which we don't have now for staff. Yeah, I would defend the use of that space for staff. It's really important.
And you know, we have not worked out all the spaces either. And I know that everybody needs storage. You probably won't find any major storage rooms in here. So we need a place, and we'll probably have to carve it out of here for, you know, out of season collections and gift books and all the stuff that, as you're well aware, show up at the library.
I would also point out that that space is, it's the darkest space in the building. There's the staff space. There's no access immediately to the edge of the building where the windows are. So for the staff who are there, you know, presumably they spend most of their time on the floor. So it seems like a good use of that space in a way.
Well, it's not a good public access space, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Yes,
With the bathrooms,
yes.
maybe we could make them more like bigger or more like more stalls.
You're absolutely right.
Only one.
Yes. The existing bathrooms are both too small, and they're not accessible to the handicapped, and there's not enough fixtures in them. And we determine that through code analysis, that you calculate the number of square feet, and that translates into, the code tells us how many people per square foot. It tells us how many fixtures we're required to put into the building. So that will happen.
I have a list of names for my idea previously.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
So the library increases 50%, the number of people in theory increases, but I noticed the parking spaces actually seem to diminish by, say, 5% as you put out that entrance. Is that going to affect the ability of people to park in order to come into the library?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if there's been any kind of analysis of how many people park during the day. I suspect there may be sometimes, even tonight, the parking lot was filled. It will have some impact.
I'd like to register my strong objection, and I think I brought it up with you at both other meetings too, perhaps only one, for moving the senior room, which is a gift to us by the Ursiola family.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason I'm a regular user of that room is because of the natural light.
Mm-hmm.
And the senior room that is being assigned on this drawing is a room that has no windows.
No, it's got all windows. This is all glass, and there's glass, so you just look.
Well, not windows out to the direct.
We'd be
I mean,
5
it's
feet
going to
away.
be coming in at an indirect area. Right now, we get direct light. The whole wall practically is lit.
I understand.
And that's one reason I like to use that for reading, is because I don't like lights on in the ceiling. I want to use light over my shoulder coming in the window. So I don't see any reason to move that room. And I would hope that you would contact the Osceola family and make sure it's okay with them too, since they gave the money, and supposedly it's on the wall as you walk in the room.
Yeah, with more natural light in the library, you can read there as well.
Well, I do that, but the library, Ellen, no offense, is not a quiet place like it was back when I first started using it many years ago. And it's distracting, to be quite honest. And I've kind of objected to the idea that there's going to be these little rooms where people are going to go to read. The whole idea of the library should be that, the library is quiet, contemplative.
That's one part
And that's
of it.
one reason I have a problem with the windows, because the kids hang out outside, and when you've got a bunch of windows that go way down low, you're gonna have kids aping on the windows, and they bounce the balls against the wall, and it's gonna be more to clean, and, right on down the line.
Yeah, I should tell you
no glass
that.
I've ever seen that has a double wall lasts for very long. Usually the seal goes.
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of warranty they give for that stuff these days, but.
It's a good warranty, but I should tell you that glass is one of the best materials for security, because when you have a solid wall, you don't know what's on the other side. When you can see and people know that they can be seen, generally they behave. And that's one of the reasons why you use a lot of gloves.
One of the things I really liked about your initial presentation was talking about the importance of flexibility and the fact that needs change over time. We were just reading in the paper the other day that bookstores are coming back and that their books are becoming more popular, which I'm sure shocked everybody. But the trend doesn't seem to be so clear as we once thought it was, perhaps. So I'm very interested to know, in your opinion, how this new layout sort of accommodates, how easy will it be to add stacks, subtract stacks, change uses, move walls in the future?
Well, I mean, part of the goal here is that none of the walls that would be built would be, quote, permanent. I mean, they would be drywall that could be taken down, or we could even use a storefront system that could be what's called stick-built, or pieces of thin aluminum that could create some of the walls. But one of the goals has been to make it flexible, and that's meaning very few permanent walls. That's why we've put things like toilets and mechanical and things that won't move kind of away, so that the entire inside can be rearranged any way you want.
You put those on the bearing walls so that I think that's good.
Also, the fact that there are a lot of new furnishings on the market for public libraries that are extremely lightweight and flexible and movable, and they're really amazing. So you can do that not only in the program room, but with some of the other settings.
I think about the mosaic, and I'm wondering if there's consideration for a percentage of the cost going to art in this building. Because I think as a community feature, and with Tacoma Park having such a huge artist community, I would suggest that be considered. And in fact, the entrance can become much more prominent, perhaps, if a similar mosaic or a different mosaic becomes a major part of that wall.
It's a good suggestion. Yeah. Yes, sorry.
On the pictures of the two entrances, and I'm sorry if I missed this, because maybe looking straight at the entrance it looks different, but the two entrances look the same to me. Is there, okay, so this is a community center, okay.
You know, it was just to say there needs to be a gesture that says there's an entrance. And I don't know what the design is really. This is just illustrating the fact there needs to be a shelter and a way of reaching out to where people are to say, here's the front door.
Yeah, I think I kind of like it actually, but I think I think that it further to the mosaic mention that something there, something artistic there. So you could say, go in the entrance with the dolphin versus go in the entrance with the locust. I don't know. You know, I mean, like something on the walls that says, so that you're not always saying library entrance, community center. It's something visually aesthetic that you can distinguish between the two entrances quickly from a side, not just the front. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's good. Yes, ma'am.
Could we go back to the layout, please?
Yes. I'm going the wrong way, probably.
Yes, thank you. It appears to me that, please correct me if I'm mistaken, to use the senior room, if you come in the main door of the library, you'll have to go through the entire library, up the steps, down the corridor, through the door, around the corner, and into the senior room. That does not seem to me to be very welcoming.
Well, you can also, whoops, where's the, I don't have the whole thing. I mean, there's also the opportunity of coming in this way, through the other door, if you don't go. Because one of the issues is that they would like to be able to have some of these spaces open when the library is closed. And so that was another issue of how do we tie the community center into both the library, or some of the spaces, I'm sorry, into both the community center and as well as the library.
Is there any reason, though, that the senior room and the two below it couldn't just be moved over flush for the outside wall and have your hallway kind of run through the middle and come out closer to the...
Yes and no, and I'll explain why we showed this much of this. There seems to be, you know, there's a lot of jogs in the corridor around here. You come in here and you hit this little funny jog and you come down. Currently, you come and you do a jog around here and you come down. And one of the thoughts with some of the folks we've been talking to said, gee, if we can have some straight shots of, you know, being able to see from the reception desk into the library, that would enable that kind of connection to be a little bit more direct so that you're not always having to take a zigzag approach. So in answer to your question, absolutely, yes, you could push it against the window. And that's the reason why we didn't, is to try to begin to find a way of connecting. And is it a good solution? I don't know. It's the best we could come up with at the time. It still needs work. Yes, sir.
Could you explain why, maybe there's a logical reason, but there's an angled wall in the back of or that one side, that's storage in a program, and there's...
Up here?
No, down below the program.
Here? Oh, this
right?
one?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the we thought that this would be a good location for a program room, both because you can get natural light. Conceivably, you could even put a door in and come in after hours if there's some event. But we didn't want to just come in a door, that all you saw was a door from the library. So we said, well, let's make this whole thing glass and make that angled wall a color or a big graphic that says reading room or something. So as you look in, the entrance appeared to be much wider and hopefully might pull you in, as opposed to just a door and a little wall. That's the only reason. It's a gesture. May remain, may not. Who knows at this point? Yes, ma'am.
I'm concerned, I mean, no, the decisions about furniture haven't been made yet. But, you know, whenever I go to an library and there's a table for four, you know, if one person's at it, I don't sit there.
Exactly.
So I've been, you know, further to the little girl's comment about hearing other people read, there's so much furniture that's available that's now like upholstered. You can even have furniture where a mother and a child can sit in the same little enclosure with some upholstery around them so that you can't actually hear. You know, it's muffled a bit. It's modern looking.
Correct.
I'd love to see stuff that's colorful furniture, comfortable furniture, though I don't know about wear and tear on upholstery, but things that invite you to sit for a while.
No, I totally agree with you, and this is just the first cut of it.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll find that we're using, some of the fabrics we're using are made by Sunbrella, that does outdoor things, so it can be cleaned very easily, and it's very durable, very colorful. So when we get to that point, we would be recommending that. We often, particularly in the children's area, use even little benches in front of a computer, because often it's not one person using the computer, it's a parent and a child, or two kids. So you're absolutely right.
What about the floor? I mean, I've seen places where they kind of designate areas by different colors on the floor, different color carpet, or here or there, or something. What are your ideas for the flooring throughout?
I would propose to use carpet. We generally use a variety of colors and patterns to define areas, but tie it all together. We're a little early for that, but yes, I think our goal is for people to walk in, to feel comfortable, to also say, wow, this is a real change, it was worth doing it. But to be timeless. We don't want to do something so trendy that it's going to look terrible in about 2 years. So it's got to be timeless and feel like it's going to last.
When you were here the last time, I mentioned that there's so many nannies come out after the meetings, the events, and they congregate along the wall. And so I went out and I suggested we still have a space for people to congregate just a little bit for that few minutes that they want to spend talking to other nannies or like if you're coming out the entrance to the left.
Right.
And just a couple little cafe type things or just benches or something so the nannies can sit and bring the baby carriages right up in front of it, which is what they often do, and just have some little space there. And it's also a good place for kids to wait for their parents, maybe, or something.
I think as we develop this a little bit farther and really take a look at the parking, I have this feeling that a lot of the parking spaces are really wide, and that
Only on the side next to the building.
next to the building.
Right.
Okay.
That's where I was parked.
But perhaps there's a way of not losing any parking and capturing an area like that by restriping or taking a look at, there could be an opportunity, gee, could you lose 2 spaces and create a little green area where you could sit out? So I think that's a good suggestion, and we'll write it down. And yes, sir.
Back to Ian's suggestion about the Sally porch. I'm looking at the top entrance, the main entrance to the community center in the back, and the distance between
This one?
those 2 sets of doors, and thinking about
Yeah.
that
That dimension.
There's space to address it in this main entrance to the library.
You're right, right. It's too small right now.
Is there a reference room? Because I like the reference room.
I'm sorry?
I don't see a reference room. An area dedicated to reference books, like the Wall Encyclopedia,
No. The reference collection generally in almost all libraries today is shrunken dramatically. Yes, there are reference books, but because so much is online that there is no longer big reference collections. Where we used to have reference 20 years ago when we were doing designing libraries, the reference could be 10 to 20% of the whole building. Now it becomes a very small.
But as I pointed out to the director, and I've actually showed her some of the books, we have some very unusual books that I assure you are not online. Not any place that I can find these that have to do with Maryland's history and things like that. And,
Are they reference books or part of the collection?
No,
that disappear.
He's talking about reference books. We do have some very special things. I think some of those could be relocated to historic Tacoma. We will have, at least a range or so on the adult side for some reference materials. But it's true, it's true that most of the reference books are simply not used ever. I work on the desk day after day, and anyone on the staff could tell you the same thing. It's a shame, but
maybe it's because people don't know that they're there, and nobody's ever actually shown them how valuable a reference section can be. And as the director knows, I often sit there because it's the only place anymore that I can be reasonably certain that I'm going to have some peace and quiet.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, all of you are bringing up, frankly, very good suggestions. Some of the things that we've had in the back of our minds, some are new to me. But I think that's one of the values of showing somebody a very conceptual drawing and getting these kinds of reactions, because it begins to get the thoughts moving and churning and enables the next step to be a better solution. So
I have one more question, if I could. The library in Silver Spring, does that have a electrostatic precipitator for dust? Because libraries are
I don't know what
known
that
for
is.
dust.
I mean,
Now, it's a device that charges those small particles of air, and then they're attracted to
no,
it.
there may be one of the mechanical ductwork. I don't
But
know.
I certainly hope
I
that
don't know.
anything that we do in the HVAC
Yeah.
will
It's
have.
it has very strong filtering and probably electronic. I don't know, to be honest with you. Yes, sir.
For any of the suggestions that have come up for exterior space, wedding that to the thought about, gee, is it worth kind of moving out that wall over the parking area toward the backup generator? The original concept for that whole area around the front of the building was that it was going to be kind of a plaza. And my recollection is that for the most part, they made it so that those slabs could sit on
Existing.
what's there.
Yeah.
They've made provisions so that that can be added.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case right over there by where we're talking about.
Yeah, it could very well be.
It's possible that if it were outdoor space
Mm-hmm.
and didn't need any support structures for a roof, I would encourage any thought. You just mentioned something about carving out a little space on the parking lot side
Mhm.
for a little place to sit. I would suggest that the much better place to put that is over on the
Over
other
on this
side,
side.
not in the parking lot. I never understand why people want to sit there and breathe exhaust.
I don't disagree with that. Well, I think that's a good suggestion. What I think would happen is you'd probably use the kind of structure you'd see in a parking garage, these big double T's that have a ability to span a long distance. Then you put a topping on it to smooth it out. And because that's a pretty long way to span, and you don't want columns cutting the span. So generally you'd get precast T's and which are not particularly expensive, and you put a topping on it and you're done.
And then you've got your outdoor space that's accessible from that corridor, from the conference room, and if there needs to be another door somewhere to access it, you've got outdoor space that people can use.
I mean, I think there are places for a lot of different kinds of gathering. I understand the thought that, I'll meet you at the library at 10, and if it's a nice day, you might want to wait outside. But you're right, I mean, it is close to the cars. But, it could be, too, that we really begin to think about this part of the outdoor area as well. Maybe there's something that's developed between the street and the library. I don't know. Maybe this is right off the top of my head, but maybe even the flagpoles get relocated, and maybe there's some, for some reason. I don't know. All these things we should just have the balls in the air at this point.
But this current plan does cut down one size of the tree.
Yes, it does. It cuts down a tree.
That willow oak out there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
How much will the height of keeping the stacks, further to the comment the person in front of me made earlier about light coming into the building, how much more light would come in if the stacks were a little lower?
I can't tell you exactly how much, but obviously more. From the children's side, there are no tall stacks. And so, that can get flooded with light. At one time, we had these stacks turned the other way, and we said, well, gee, let's turn them this way so at least you get views right through and get the sunlight to be between. So, the more serious this becomes, the more we begin to deal with things like that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the higher stacks block more.
Is there an estimate to how much furniture costs will be per the average square footage of this type of library?
We have seen per square foot cost range from a low of, depending upon a jurisdiction, anywhere from a low of $22 a square foot to I've seen people spend up to $35 or $40 a square foot for furniture. I tell people on the low side to budget around 25 to 30, and that's just sort of a broad brush, and people can spend less or more, and quality goes up and down. So
it's, I'm sorry, I forget how much square footage. That's 15,000. So times
roughly, if it was
$500,000, then $500,000
up to that. But if your stacks are still good, we've actually had reused stacks and electrostatically paint them. You put a charge on them and you change the color of them. Very simple. If the stacks are good, metal stacks, and just put new end panels so it looks like a new collection. So lots of different ways of manipulating the cost of furnishings, but stacks are one of the big costs.
Bruce, could you refresh my memory? With, on the parking lot near the co-op and that whole project, is that going to go forward soon? I mean, is there any way that still that space could be used for trailers for the library books while this is being completed, or is that's a done deal? That's too late for that to consider that.
My best answer is I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't think they got the contract yet.
And we've worked with libraries who have had a couple of double wides in a parking lot and offered limited services. There are lots of different ways.
There were trailers back here for the community center construction.
I'm not surprised.
I think with a lot of activity in that co-op lot, it would kind of redefine the area with the energy for people going there, and then it would kind of maybe give you a better idea of what we really should have there eventually.
It'll be another important discussion.
I'm sure.
Yes.
So if there are no other questions or comments, thank you very much for coming and for all the suggestions.
De lado a lado, de arriba hasta abajo, tu piel me enloquece, empieza, te excita, se adueña, la melodía seca, te siente, me baila, te quiero mía, baila de lado a lado, de arriba hasta abajo, tu piel me enloquece, empieza, te excita, se adueña, la melodía seca, te siente, me baila, te quiero mía, baila de lado a lado, de arriba hasta abajo, tu piel me
Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, ¿cómo estás?
Saludo a mi mamá, saludo a mi papá, saludo a mis hermanos, saludo a los demás.
Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? Saludo a Nicaragua, Argentina y Perú, a Cuba y Puerto Rico, ¿a quién saludas tú? Buenos días, buenos días, buenos
and they always say, play where are you going? Because I like to go out to have fun, to enjoy. With the ladies of my hometown, with them I like to dance. It's time for the party and the player to advance.
Where you going, player?
To dance.
Where you going to dance?
To my hometown.
Where you going, player?
To have fun.
Where you gonna have fun?
I'm going over there.
I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love. I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love.
And now all the couple dancing to the rhythm of my song. 'Cause at night always singing and the beat is always on. Now all the body's moving with the rhythm and their hit. With the lady of my hometown in the sunrise.
I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love. I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love.
The night is almost over and beat it of my song. This song is almost rising, it's 6 in the morning. Everyone say farewell with a kiss and goodbye. See you soon, player, see you all tomorrow night.
Where you going, player?
To dance.
Where you going to dance?
To my hometown.
Where you going, player?
To have fun.
Where you gonna have fun?
I'm going over there.
I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love. I don't care if they call me player, 'cause I have the girl that I love. Where you going, player?
To dance.
Where you going to dance?
To my home.
Meeting of Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar.
Here.
Councilmember Mail.
Here.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Schultz.
Here. Okay, terrific. This evening, for the agenda, we're going to move the presentation of the proclamation recognizing the 95th anniversary of Boy Scout Troop 33 up for our first agenda item. And then this evening is the last meeting of our City Council of this year. We will meet again in January. Our meetings are moving from Monday nights to Wednesday night. So our first meeting of 2016 will be on Wednesday, January 13th. And so I think with that, I'll start with the proclamation for the Boy Scouts. Do you folks want to come up and receive the proclamation?
95 years old.
That's like 4 generations.
All right. Yeah, you want to go this way? All right. Well, am I on? Okay. This is nice.
Okay, this comes another one.
Okay. All right, are we ready? All right. Recognizing the 95th anniversary of Boy Scout Troop 33 in Tacoma Park. Whereas Tacoma Park Boy Scout Troop 33 was established in 1920 in partnership with the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church and has been a solid part of the community ever since. And whereas Troop 33 is one of the oldest continuously running troops in Maryland. And whereas the troop has a proud history of service to the community and the nation. And whereas in World War II, 8 former troop members were killed in action, the troop's has 8 stars on it to signify these members lost in war. And whereas since 1920, thousands of scouts have participated in the troop, and more than 146 of the troop's members have earned Scouting's highest achievement, the rank of Eagle Scout. And whereas Troop 33 has had a far-reaching positive impact on our community by providing youth with a safe and exciting environment in which to learn the value of citizenship, service, teamwork, fitness, and leadership. Now, therefore, I, Kate Stewart, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, on behalf of the City Council, staff, and residents, do hereby join the Boy Scouts of Troop 33 and their families, leaders, and volunteers in celebrating the troop's 95th anniversary, dated this 14th day of December 2015. Thank you very much.
Good job. Good job. Congrats, sir.
Oh, there he is. Jared showed up.
Okay, so now we're going to take a short break because we need to take the council photo. I promise you this will only take a few minutes, and then we'll have public comments on voting. Items. We have a consent agenda, which is our voting item this evening, that has our resolution setting forth the dates of our holiday recess, as well as the appointment to a number of committees. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding our voting item this evening? No? Then we will move on to general public comments. If you'd like to speak this evening, please come to the podium, state your name and where you live. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Pearsall, 7708 Tacoma Avenue, and I'm here with my neighbor Julie Schmidt, who will also address you on Montgomery College. I went to a Montgomery College meeting Thursday, December 10th, and we were shown a slideshow, which was narrated, which was discussing their vision for 2016 to 2026 on our campus. Unfortunately, there were absolutely no handouts, nothing written, no numbers that we could critique. There were figures that we would like to get. They are asking the board's permission. They are meeting with their board and asking permission if they can give us this material. We don't know whether they will or not. In addition, there is a chapter that they are writing about our campus, which will have more detail in it, that we need to have a draft of. And we do have a 2002 agreement. You know, the college is supposed to be consulting with us. But what we heard on the 10th was that they weren't releasing that until the 25th after the board approves it. And so I don't think that's really consulting, and we should reach out and get that draft document soon as we can. I mean, time is of the essence here. After that, it goes February 1st to the Maryland Higher Education Commission for a vote. The board votes on it on the 25th, and then it goes on of January, and on February 2nd, it goes to the Maryland Higher Education Commission, where it starts a process, which is a very important process to us. What I saw were substantial changes to the campus. One of them is demolishing Falcon Hall, and which is on Tacoma Avenue, and that is their athletic center. The pool is going, and their new science building is going to encompass this space, and so it's a very large building, and I'm seeing a lot of density. A lot more density to the campus, which is concerning. We need figures. We need to study it. They're saying that their buildings are going to be the size of the Nunley building, which is pretty big, even though they say it's 3 stories, but it's close to a 50-foot building. So we need to look at that. They're defining opportunity sites, Burlington Avenue still, that they're not building on yet. They're the 2 storage buildings, and now they defined a property on Jessup Blair Park, which was new, a location. The daycare center was another very important item. They are closing it, and that my neighbor is here to speak to that. We need to be sure that the zoning does not change. That is protected under our 2002 agreement. It's in the historic district, but we want to reach out to the county and make sure that they do not try to change the underlying zoning. It should remain residential. And I ask that you bring them here as early as possible in January so that they can talk to us meaningfully about their project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name's Julie Schmidt. I live at 7710 Tacoma Avenue. And as Lorraine said, I'm here to address the council specifically on the question of the daycare center, although I have concerns about all of this as well. The concern I have is that my understanding is that that property is part of the 2002 agreement with the city. It is supposed to remain residential. It is part of the historic district. I'm troubled by what I've heard from Lorraine about what happened at the meeting, that there was sort of this, that the college seemed not willing to really engage in consultation or to answer questions raised by a community member about what was going to happen with this property or with other expansion. I agree with Lorraine that this, I'm hoping that the college will come and meet with this board, but I do think that probably it would be in everyone's best interest if there was a way of reaching out to them prior to January. This seems like it's moving very quickly and that they're trying to make this a fait accompli before they have to engage the city or the community on this issue. So I'm hoping there's a way to send a letter or to somehow reach out and request information, because it does appear they are withholding information from community members. This meeting wasn't even advertised. As somebody whose property abuts the college, I was not aware of the meeting until after the fact, and I do have a relationship with the college. I do, talk to people there. I, know the groundskeeper. I've talked to the provost before, and nobody was made aware of this. It's almost as if they didn't want community input at this meeting. So, thank you. I'm just hoping there's a way that this body can reach out before January. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add with the daycare center that at the meeting, they basically said that we got the impression it wasn't really imminent, that they were closing the daycare. On the other hand, I'm hearing from community members that they are learning through their sources, possibly at the daycare, that it'll be closed in March. So we need some clarification on that. And when I asked the provost to work with us on the disposition of that property, he said, "We will inform you of our decision." So that's what I'm talking about. I saw an unwillingness to work with us, and so please reach out to them on that. And I agree with Julie. Actually, they advertised a tiny bit, but not much. I mean, they really didn't do a flyer or anything on this meeting. It was a pretty important meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Sally Kern, and I live at 7114 Woodland Avenue. I wanted to thank the county officials for coming tonight. I wanted to talk about the school issue. I've had kids two boys in public school, the homeschools, for 12 years, and it seems to me that overcrowding is getting worse with no plans to address it, just plans to study it. As we know, Tacoma Park is having a building boom. We'll be getting more and more students, and we have a very high farms ratio in our homeschools. Meanwhile, we see buildings, new schools, and renovations in other parts of the county. Right now, I hear that the starting class size for kindergarten at Tacoma Park Elementary is 25 students. When my kids attended, they're now a sophomore and junior, an eighth grader at Tacoma Middle and a junior at Blair, and they had 15 or 16 students in their kindergarten class. All the chatter on the Blair listserv is about how we can have a graduation where students can have a few members of their family attend. Graduating high school is one of the highest achievements or many of these kids will achieve, and they can't even get their whole family members. They practically scalp tickets at this point. The PTSA was worried that we might have to do fundraising just to pay for having a big enough graduation site. I appreciate the classroom additions plan for Tacoma Park Middle School, but I think that our elementary and high school students deserve better. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Kirsch, and I live at 7111 Woodland Ave in Tacoma Park. And I, like Sally, thank the county officials for coming and you all for your hard work. Also here to talk about the school's overcrowding issue. And I wasn't prepared to talk about it, but cared about the issue. And then when I saw that we could use a few more speakers, I saw it. Forgive me. But I am a parent of two kids at Tacoma Middle School, one going to Blair next year. But my kids were at Rolling Terrace Elementary for the last 7 years, on and off between the two of them. Very overcrowded school. I think you probably know it's maybe 150 to 200 kids over capacity. You all know the numbers already, but the anecdotal stories that I would hear that left an impression with me about how it feels to be a student in an overcrowded school were around the recess issue. And it is a big deal in fifth grade when you only have 25 minutes, as it turns out, or even 20 sometimes coming and going, to just play. And my soccer-loving son wants to play soccer every day out there. And they really had to fight for the space between the students. There were 130 fifth graders. And we had, halfway through our time at Rolling Terrace, we'd gotten 4 portables, which drastically dug into the space that Rolling Terrace already has, which is a pretty small space. It got to the point where kids were fighting over who could play soccer, and somebody had to play on the blacktop. One group of like 30 kids had to play on the blacktop, and the other group got the field. And it really, sadly, and this is totally anecdotal, but it started to even break down a little bit along race lines of who was playing with whom, which did not happen. And I kind of, to me, this was a good example. We talk about how wars are fought around resources, and access to land and water, and I know this is taking it astray, but I do think that was what was happening. They did not have enough space for everybody to play happily together, nor did they have enough soccer balls, but that was a different issue. And then when we were leaving Rolling Terrace, we heard that there were going to be 4 more portables. I cannot imagine what recess looks like at Rolling Terrace now with 135 big, growing kids trying to play. So I think it's a big issue. I hope that we can do something about it as a community to add on to these wonderful schools that we have. People move here in part because we have such wonderful schools, but we need to grow the schools and the school capacity. Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? Okay, we'll move on to, for the record, we had this week, the staff had their holiday luncheon, and I was able to attend and present a proclamation to recognize our housing manager, Linda Walker, who is retiring after 27 years in service here in Tacoma Park. I won't read the whole proclamation, but I'll note that Linda was involved in the implementation of Tacoma Park's rent stabilization program, the development of procedures for monitoring rents charged to tenants, the development of the Emergency Assistance Fund, and providing low-income residents with access to needed medical care, food, and housing. And so I just wanted to let folks know we had a very nice event and going away for Linda, and wanted to recognize her. All right. Now we'll move on to council comments. Any council comments for this evening? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is, as you said, a busy time of year. I just wanted to make a note that I've attended several different functions in the last week. Went to the Maryland Municipal League Legislative Dinner with my colleagues on the council and many of the state delegates and senators from this area. Also, county council members were there. Went to the historic Tacoma holiday party yesterday, which I congratulate Lorraine Pearsall, who's here with us tonight, and Diana Cohn and the other members of the historic Tacoma that organized that. It was a nice party, but also had a nice presentation by Frances Phipps on the house on Holly Avenue that she and her husband just renovated. Had a chance to go to the Christmas party at the Essex House Apartments yesterday, and I would like to thank Councilmember Smith for the invitation. Essex Apartments is in his ward, and it was a fantastic function, a lot of people and a lot of fun. Also went to the Council of Governments award banquet last week, and a Council of Governments function today. It was a special briefing on vigilance, really talking about the various terrorist activities that have plagued the world recently, and talked about, it was a presentation by the FBI and Department of Homeland Security plus local police on what municipalities should be thinking about to prepare and to discourage such events in our area. And so I would like to think that we could schedule a briefing from our police department where we could have a chance to talk about that. And I'll send a request in an email later on that. And then lastly, I would just like to pass on a message from our official peace delegate, Pat Lovelace, who is for many years been a member of this audience every Monday night for our council meetings. He's had difficulty getting here in recent months because of his health and lack of transportation down here. But he did want me to relay his holiday wishes and let you know that he wants peace, peace, peace. Thank you.
Thank you. See, Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. First question is for the city manager. Did you get any information from Mike O'Reilly regarding the playground at Sligo Creek?
I don't have that information yet.
Okay, thank you. And I would also like to join Councilmember Siemens and thank the residents at Essex House for putting on a fantastic seniors dinner. There were a lot of people that came out and participated, and everyone said that they had a great time, and that's the type of capacity building that should be going on here in Tacoma Park in the apartment buildings. Thank you.
Councilmember Mail.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the city manager about follow-up with regard to the building on Colby Avenue.
I know there were a number of emails this afternoon. I have not read them, so I'll find out that information and get it to you.
So as far as you know, construction is still ongoing on the site?
I don't have the information.
Okay, thank you. And the second question for the city manager was whether either tonight or at some later date you can provide an update on the progress with regard to Tacoma Junction.
Yes.
So one thing that would be helpful to check with is just to check with SHA on the timing of signalization modernization. The sidewalk and the street are painted with lots of markings suggesting something will happen soon. But just getting some specifics on that would be useful, in particular because I'm assuming there will be traffic impacts
Right.
in that location. But then
Yeah,
also
I have some information on that for
okay,
tonight.
great. And then also with regard to the actual progress with the developer, I was sort of expecting by this point we would be in progress of community charrettes or some other level of engagement, and so I'm just feeling like things have slipped a bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. First, I just wanted to mention for Ward 1 residents in particular, particularly in the Penn area, there have been some break-ins recently. One neighbor of mine about 3 doors away was actually broken into once and attempted second time all within the month. So we've arranged for the police, and Jason, the deputy city manager, is helping with this also. Tomorrow night at 7:30 in the Azalea Room here in the municipal building at 7:30, and any of the Ward 1 people are more than welcome. I hope we get a good turnout. Secondly, I just want to follow up on Lorraine Stewart and Julie Schmidt's comments. The concern about the Montgomery College situation is that it is a 10-year master plan that they're working on, and for reasons I'm not entirely sure of, the process has really been telescoped into a very short amount of time, and what I think would normally be expected to be a reasonable amount of time for comment and consultation and review seems to have, because the timing has been telescoped, and that may be due to the new state administration shortening the end deadline, but that has led to less opportunity, I think, for us to really understand what it is they're talking about, and obviously has an impact in their neighborhood. So I do think it would be a good idea for us to make a formal request that they provide us with the data and the schematics and the other material sooner rather than later, because otherwise we're potentially looking at a situation where we would only see that for the first time right around the time it's approved. And I know it's a 10-year plan, so it doesn't all happen immediately thereafter, but we might only see that about the time it's approved in February. So I'd like to, following up on what the two North Tacoma folks mentioned, have us formally request, if we can, the plans as soon as that's possible, and also to ask that the provost or whoever from his team come and do a presentation maybe toward the end of January, but before the final action by the board. And then the last thing I just want to mention, people all know Pat Rumbaugh, the play lady, and I think a lot of us have been at her events. I think she circulated to everybody on the council this recent article she wrote that was actually picked up in a blog by a woman named Darcia Narvaez, who's a PhD writer for Psychology Today. So her article is now in the Psychology Today, at least online version. So if you got that, I'll resend it around. Folks in the city might just want to see it. You should feel free to circulate. I'm going to put it out on the Ward 1 listserv. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So as I think I've been just shadowing Councilmember Siemens for the last few days. There have been a lot of the same events. Some of the other ones, I attended the Tacoma Academy on Friday evening, had a lovely holiday choral event that I was able to attend. And then on Saturday, we had a couple of new businesses moving and opening. The Long and Foster opened their business on Pine, and Still Point moved from Pine and now has a location on Grant Avenue. And Bikram Yoga in the Junction is now under new management. So thank you to Laura Barkley and the Old Town Business Association. We had very nice ribbon cutting ceremonies this Saturday. And I think just following up on what Councilmember Kovar said, I know we're going into a bit of a recess, but if staff could follow up on the Montgomery College, yes, and then just let us know if while we're in recess, if a letter would be appropriate, or what's the appropriate thing to do to follow up with that. Thank you. Does the city manager have any comments?
Yes. First, just a reminder that besides the council being on recess, we do have some times when our buildings are closed over the holidays. Our city offices and facilities will close 12:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and then stay closed through the weekend. And then the following week, they will close at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve through Saturday, January 2nd. I also, just also on a scheduling note,
This is the final week for leaf collection, so please urge your constituents to get the leaves out to the curb. There are several streets that have scheduled leaf collection along state highways. So those are Carroll, Ethan Allen, and Piney Branch Road have their final leaf collection on Monday, the 21st. Did follow up on and got an answer for Councilmember Siemens regarding MCPS staff blowing leaves onto Grant Avenue, as well as early trash pickup at Maple Avenue Market. Staff has contacted both entities and reported the problems. The most, I think, important issue to let people know about is that the Maryland Healthcare Commission does meet this Thursday. This is they have a meeting at 1 p.m. in Baltimore in their offices. There will be a presentation from the city and at least one hospital, perhaps two other hospitals, on the Certificate of Need application for Washington Adventist Hospital. A decision on their application is likely on Thursday. And so we'll be sharing some information from legal counsel about that later this evening, but it's a fairly significant date. The second item I wanted to mention on general items of interest does have to do with Tacoma Junction development. And discussions have been ongoing between the city's development attorneys and NDC. We had thought they'd be completed this week. It looks like it may still be shortly, but it's not done yet. Once that discussion is done, it will come back to the council, and we will start publicizing kind of the process for community charrettes and how that process goes forward. But we're not in a position to be able to share that information yet. Those negotiations are ongoing. We are going to be, over the recess, keeping the information up to date as best we can on our website. One of the things also Councilmember Mail mentioned, seeing some markings on the pavements. PEPCO is going through doing upgrades to pedestrian crossing signals at all of the signalized intersections in the city. The Public Works Director anticipates some traffic issues with that work, as well as moving the power lines from the Carroll Avenue Bridge project. I don't know if that's all that's involved, and so it's something I'll find out. The other things I want to mention is that we're celebrating the library's 80th birthday this week. So on Wednesday at 7 p.m., you can come to the library and have cake and lemonade. We don't know that that's the actual 80th date, but it is the 80th year. Immediately after getting some cake and lemonade, people are urged to come and listen and participate in reviewing the plans that have been proposed for the Tacoma Park Library renovation. And we very much are interested in what the public comments are on these so that we can bring that back to the council. The police community relations request for proposal is going to be reissued with some modifications. We did receive some comments from the city attorney's office on how to do that, and that will be done soon. And then, except for this Thursday's meeting at the Maryland Healthcare Commission, I'm going to take some days off. So I'll be off Tuesday through Tuesday, and then I'll be back. And our deputy city manager will be in charge during those days. Okay. I'll follow up on the other items that were raised and get that information back to you.
Terrific. Councilmember Merrill, do you have a question?
Yeah. Is the agreement or discussion with NDC, is that going to produce a finalized document?
Yes.
And will that document be reviewed by council before it's finalized, or will it be finalized?
Yeah,
okay.
It's not finalized between them.
Okay. And I just wanted to remind the city manager that, and my colleagues, that I would really prefer it if there's a section in that agreement which is relevant to the co-op, that we find a way to share that content, either specifically that content or the general outline of that content with co-op before finalization.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if there's been any discussions on that, but I'll find out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Councilmember Schultz.
With regard to the Maryland Healthcare Commission meeting this Thursday, you are suggesting that we might want to consider attending that meeting. Could you elaborate a little bit about as to the basis for your advice on that?
Certainly. I think that a decision to remove a acute care hospital from a community is a significant decision. I don't know that that's ever happened in Maryland's history. And I think that recognizing that city officials are concerned about the impact on health care in Tacoma Park as well as the leaving of our major employer is a significant step that needs to be dealt with caution.
Years. Since 2007, we've had a particularly strong surge of enrollment growth. In an 8-year period, we've grown by 18,702 students, and we're at 156,447 students this year. And if you go back even further, we have been increasing by about 2,000 per year for 30 years. Back in the mid-1980s, when we kind of aged out the baby boom generation and we had kind of gone down, since then, since 1983, we've grown by 65,000 students. So it's really been a 30-year transformation of the school system growth in all areas of the county. And growth in areas like Tacoma Park, where there's not a lot of new development, but there's changing demographics that are causing enrollment growth. And so the next 6 years, which is our CIP year period, we're estimating about 10,000 more students will enter the school system. Now, if you look at it by annual increases, you can see just how big these have been, 2,500 plus in the last 3 years, and just a huge amount. And most of this in this period of 8 years has been at the elementary school level. And that's, you can see that has occurred because of the birth trends that we've seen. From 2000 to about 2007, we were climbing in resident births in the county pretty markedly. And as those students entered the system, that pushed up enrollment. Of course, 5 years later, these births become kindergarten students and have been moving through the system. But it looks like we peaked in 2007, at least for the time being. And since then, we've trended down somewhat, and that's going to give us a little bit of a respite at the elementary level. This decline has been associated with the Great Recession, and it's been called the baby recession. It's something that happened nationally as well as statewide and locally. It's just a reluctance of families to have children, to form households during economic uncertainties. But you can see in 2014, it looks like we've kind of moved through that period, and now we're having higher births. So for a period of time, we're going to see a little bit of a plateauing at the elementary level. The top graph here, the blue line, is enrollment in grades K to 5. And you can see, like I said, from 2007 to 15, about 13,000 of that 18,700 growth was at elementary schools. So the vast majority has been at that level. We're about at 71,500 now, and we're just about at a peak because of those births coming down. And that's why the projection shows pretty much a flat period coming up, about a 313 decline in 6 years. The only that's helpful in terms of putting more demands on elementary schools, but it's important to know that we're behind in catching up with all that growth we've already had at the elementary schools. We have 381 relocatable classrooms around the county now, and 85% of those are at elementary schools. So we clearly have a lot of work to do to catch up with the growth that we've already had at elementaries. And then you see the green line is grades 6 to 8. We've already begun to see the wave of elementary students moving up into the middle grades. We've grown by 3,400 there, and we expect another 3,500 middle school students. And at the high school level, the wave is, of course, coming a little bit further out as those kids get older and reach high school age. 1,200 more in the last 8 years, but we've got 6,900 more high school students in the next 6 years coming. And those secondary enrollment growth, middle and high, are just tremendous. If you think about our high schools are 2,200 or to 2,400, that's like 3 high schools worth of enrollment growth, and it's like 3 middle schools worth of enrollment growth. You know, spread around the county, but still a huge impact on facilities, where we're already behind at the elementary level, and we've got this compounding problem now trying to keep up with all the secondary growth. A little bit about student diversity. That's been the driver of all this growth. All of this enrollment growth, that 65,000 increase since the mid-'80s, has been in non-white groups. White enrollment has actually declined over that period. All the growth has been in Hispanic, African American, Asian, and now we have the 2 or more race category. We're reaching a point where Hispanic share of total enrollment is about to cross lines with the white non-Hispanic. We have no majority group anymore. The last time we were over 50% in any race ethnic group was back in 2000 when we were just slightly over 50% white, but that's been trending down, as I said. We already at the elementary schools system-wide have more Hispanic students than white non-Hispanic. So we are becoming a more Hispanic school district. Those demographics also correlate with a big increase in our socioeconomic diversity and poverty in the county. This is the picture for free and reduced meals. This has been growing even faster than our enrollment growth, which has been fast enough. But you see there's about a 50% increase here, over a 50% increase in the students qualifying from free and reduced meals. And we were at 54,500 students this fall. And 83% of these get the free portion of the program, meaning they're at such a poverty level that they qualify for free meals. The other 17% get the reduced price. And this percent of free has been going up year after year after year, just as the total number has gone up. And the correlation between free and reduced meals and Hispanic and African enrollment is very strong. If you looked at all the farms enrollment, that 54,000 students, over half of those students are Hispanic and a third of those students are African American. Really very few percentage-wise are Asian and white. So it's a very disproportionate distribution between those two groups. And of course, those are the two groups that we have the big challenge of the achievement gap between African American and Hispanic students and white and Asian students. And it's highly correlated with this poverty in those groups. So that's a quick tour of the demographics. So the CIP, as I said, totals $1.73 billion over a 6-year period. And as I said at the beginning, we've got 3 main challenges. We need to add a lot of capacity. We're still behind at the elementary level for the growth that's already occurred. And we need to face the future with so many more middle school and high school kids. The second thing we need to do is we need to continue our revitalization expansion program, whereby we upgrade aging schools to become modern facilities. And in almost every case, we're adding additional capacity there, too, as we revitalize those schools. That's a big part of our CIP. And the third part that's very critical is the maintenance of our facilities, HVAC, roof replacements, the kind of things that just have to be done to keep our schools in operational shape. Roughly 1/3 of the goes to each of these in the capital budget, 33% roughly to each area. So the first thing I'll point out is addition projects, and I've highlighted in red the ones that affect students in the city of Tacoma Park. We have a number of projects that were approved already and are moving forward. That's the left-hand column. A lot of times the CIP is just continuing a lot of projects. It's not completely rewritten, but every year that we face new enrollments, we add new projects. So the new projects added this year are in addition to Tacoma Park Middle School, which will be completed in August 2020. The school currently has 1,055 students with a capacity of 939, and it's projected to go up to over 1,300 students. So we'll be bringing that school up to a capacity of just under 1,500 students. We're finding ourselves having to make our middle schools bigger than they were in the past and our high schools bigger to keep up with the growth. East Silver Spring is also going to have an addition. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's associated with other schools that need relief. East Silver Spring is not over capacity itself greatly, but an addition there will help relieve Rolling Terrace. And then we've got Piney Branch, which is scheduled for a feasibility study next year, and then we plan an addition to open there in August 2021. That school came in higher in enrollment this year, and it's a very tight site. It's our smallest school site in the county, and it's very difficult to add on to there, but we're going to do a feasibility study next year, and hopefully we can add to that school. So this lower area of the Down County Consortium where Tacoma Park is, was studied last year. We did what we call a comprehensive capacity study. Because we face particularly large space deficits at Forest Knolls. Let's see if I can point these at the top here. Forest Knolls has been over capacity for some time. It's almost 200 seats over capacity now. The other schools that are over capacity are Woodland. Woodland is about 130 over capacity now and continues to be so. And Rolling Terrace is 150 students over capacity and needs relief there. So, and then Piney Branch is over capacity and projected to grow. So those 4 schools in particular were studied for additions, as well as all the other schools in this area, because we were not confident that we could add on to some of these, and sometimes you have to add on to a school adjacent to another one in order to relieve that one down the road through boundary changes. And that was the conclusion in terms of Forest Knolls. It's not really feasible to add an addition there, and the same with Rolling Terrace. And that's because Rolling Terrace already has a capacity of 747. That's about our top end for most of our schools. And Forest Knolls has a capacity of 555, but it has a very difficult site to add on to. So those 2 schools needed to find some way to be relieved by capacity being built somewhere else. On the other hand, Woodland and Piney Branch are capable of additions, we believe. Woodland's already had a capacity study, so we know we can add on there, so that'll take care of that problem. And Piney Branch, as I said, the feasibility study will be done next year, and we'll determine if we can go ahead and build there. And I know there's an issue with the city on the pool there, so we'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure. But anyway, so instead of Forest Knolls getting an addition, the plan is to add to Montgomery Knolls and Pinecrest and reassign students once those projects are done down the road. And the schedule for those additions and these are paired schools, so we need to add on to both because it's K2 and 3-5. Students would be reassigned there when that capacity becomes available in August 2020. In terms of Rolling Terrace, the East Silver Spring addition also would open in August 2020, and we would do a boundary study and reassign students when that capacity is available. So that's the current plan in the CIP. As we presented this to the Board of Education, they did support this in the CIP. This is what we're requesting, but they also asked staff to look at what options might exist for another elementary school down the road. We did look at elementary schools as part of this study, but the superintendent recommended these additions for the time being, and the board supported that, but they felt like we need to keep our options open. So we'll be doing some in-house assessment of some former closed schools in this area and see if what the feasibility would be to open another school sometime down the road. So that'll be determined next fall when we go into the next CIP cycle. So in terms of new school projects, there's none that directly affect your area, but we have schools opening up in Clarksburg, two middle schools, one in Clarksburg, one in Bethesda, and 2 elementary schools, one in Rockville and one in Germantown, and another new elementary school in Clarksburg. So those are in the CIP. Now, again, there's not many revitalization expansion projects affecting Tacoma Park. No elementary schools, but I put Wheaton in here because you're part of the Down County Consortium, and Wheaton is one of the 5 high schools that students in this area can choose to attend. This area is in the base area of Blair, of course, but that is well underway, opening in January 2016, a brand new Wheaton High School. Okay. And the Thomas Edison High School a year after that also could affect students in Tacoma Park if they attend that. So overall, there's a lot of capacity being added here, almost 6,000 elementary seats, again, trying to catch up with past growth and to some extent new growth in certain parts of the county. It's 3 new elementary schools, 14 additions, 6 RevX projects. Middle school capacity, 4,000 seats, 2 new middle schools, 5 additions, 2 RevXs, and high school capacity almost 2,300. And that will add 1,200 seats for additions and 1,000 for RevXs. Now, the push up in enrollment from the middles to the high schools is certainly going to affect the Down County Consortium high schools. So this year we're doing a capacity study for the 5 Down County Consortium high schools, which is all part of your area. Your students can choose these schools. And in every case, we're going to be seeing what can be added onto these schools. More and more, we're building high schools up to 2,400 capacity. Of course, Blair is already at 2,900, but we're going to look at all these schools and see what the possibility is of increasing their capacity, because all of these schools face space deficits in the next 6 years. Blair is projected to reach almost 3,400 students, almost 500 over capacity. Einstein is going to be 400 over capacity in 2021. Kennedy, 230. Northwood, 480 over capacity, and Wheaton, 160. So we have a huge amount of high school capacity to get built in this area, and our first step is to see, can we add on to these schools? And a lot of these do have relatively small buildings right now by today's standards, not Blair, but all the other ones are around 1,600 to 1,800 capacity. So hypothetically, if it's possible, we could bring them up to 2,400 and take care of a lot of that growth. And I did mention already that Piney Branch will be studying the coming year for an addition project. And the board asked about the pool and whether that could be maintained. At first we thought it wouldn't be possible, but the plan is to evaluate options to add on that try to preserve the pool, and options may be developed that can't preserve it because of the limited site and the ability to add on there. But we will be looking at both approaches. In terms of the maintenance of facilities, there's some increases from previous CIPs, particularly for fire safety upgrades. HVAC is a constant area of concern in school communities, and there's been a very healthy increase made here in the CIP. Same with roof replacements. And a new project is to convert regular grass fields to artificial turf in high school stadiums around the county. There's 19 that don't have that benefit now, and we're looking at a 6-year approach to try to provide those to all high school stadiums. And that's the overview. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Seth Adams, the Division of Construction Director, is here as well, if I can't answer something.
Sure. Thank you very much. Since Councilmember Mail has been looking at this issue and asking us to bring you here, I'm going to let him go first.
Okay.
Thank you for coming out tonight, and I just want to sort of make some overall comments, and then I'll try to get into questions. I guess the thing that's hard to see from a Tacoma Park perspective in a presentation like this that maybe we can follow up on is thinking about just where students who are residents of Tacoma Park end up. You know, I think the majority of our students are at Blair or at schools that are based in the city, are at Silver Spring International and Rolling Terrace. You know, that's probably 90% of our population. And so, you know, that's where I've tried to focus the time that I've spent looking at CIPs and looking at county investments. I spent time going all the way back to